It can only be attributable to human error.
You're entering paranormal.
He meddled in things that you keep before. He meddled in
Slug.
things. He meddled in things.
Where will we go next? Just phantom from another time.
No one, Mr. Mulder.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
That is one big pile of shit.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex Daikaiju,
I'm Jasmine with
I'm Eli Watson.
and you're listening to
Cryptid.
Campfire.
Woohoo!
Woohoo. Welcome everyone to a special episode of Cryptid Campfire. Today we are joined by Scott Mardis, who's an independent cryptozoology researcher and champ investigator. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm really glad that you're able to be on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me on.
We're in the middle of what we are calling the Summer of Champ. We're doing a Champ series, and you are our interview for this series.
All right.
We wanted to do a big send-off to Champ, and we figured what better way than to have the Scott Mardis on the show with us.
Thank you.
So, Scott, you've been doing this for about 27 years, is that correct?
Yep. My first field expedition was November of 1992.
Hey, that's when I was born.
28 years.
28 years. Wild.
Dang, that's the time of when Jasmine May with.
I actually lived there for 18 years. Then I got married and moved to Florida, but I still go back every summer for about a month to continue my field investigations.
And before we get into that, I did want to ask you, when was the first time you heard about Champ?
Probably sometime in the early 1990s when I was living in Philadelphia.
Interesting.
I had seen Sandra Manzi's famous photograph from 1977, if you're familiar with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at the Free Library of Philadelphia looking for books on the Loch Ness Monster and stumbled up on Joe Zarzinski's book, Champ Beyond the Legend, and checked it out of the library and read it, and that really got me hooked. I had seriously decided to abandon a career in music to get into aquatic cryptozoology, and at one point around that same time, I was seriously thinking about packing up and going to Scotland and moving to Loch Ness.
Huh.
Then I read the book about Champ, and I figured it was very much easier to move from Pennsylvania to Vermont than it was to immigrate to Scotland. So I changed my plans and moved to Vermont.
Wow.
Can I just ask Scott, what music did you play before you got into Champ research?
Well, we were doing original music. I had a band called Halcyon, and we were playing sort of maybe a hybrid between new wave and progressive rock. Say maybe REM trying to play Black Sabbath and Yes.
Oh, that's dope.
One brothers on the side, it was kind of weird. We were trying to play progressive rock, but we didn't really have the chops. So it kind of came out as punk progressive rock. Sort of maybe the Police meets King Crimson. I don't know, somewhere in there.
Oh wow. Oh, that's awesome.
We just never were in the right place at the right time to get noticed. We played a few clubs, but it didn't pan out.
Yeah. Is this when you had long hair?
I still have long hair.
I mean, yeah, I guess that's true, huh?
Yeah, get it, Eli.
And a beard.
Oh yeah, I can't grow that.
Not yet. We'll make a man out of you yet, Eli.
I saw one picture with your sort of Robert Plantish hair, so.
Yeah. It's my. I don't think I've cut my hair in almost 2 years now.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Just kind of. I just didn't feel like cutting it, and I still
Yeah.
don't. So.
I've been wearing my hair long since I was 13, and I'm 56 now, so you do the math.
It's
Ooh,
43
give me a
years.
moment, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Oh, dang.
You mentioned that you go every summer to investigate Champ,
Yep.
and what kind of research methods do you include or do you
Well,
utilize?
the best that I can use, I've tried to concentrate the hunt for the last few years on trying to find some kind of physical evidence that could be used as a type specimen.
Hmm.
Because until you have physical evidence that there is an unusual animal in Lake Champlain, it will never be officially recognized as a real animal. There are laws on the books that theoretically protect Champ, but
Mm-hmm.
they have no teeth in them because it's not been established as a real animal. If we
Hmm.
can ever establish that there is a physical population of animals behind the Lake Champlain monster reports, then they will be officially protected like any other endangered species. So it's highly desirable to find proof that there is a real animal behind the stories. So I don't want to hurt one of the animals.
Mm-hmm.
So the two logical ways to go about this is you look for remains of dead ones that have already died, say on the bottom or possibly inside underwater caves, because we know that some sea turtles go into caves, they either get lost or they go in them on purpose to die. And there's been several findings of masses of dead sea turtle bones in oceanic underwater caves.
Mm.
And there are caves like that in and around Lake Champlain. Some of them are above water now because it used to be marine and it used to be much deeper. So I have
Hmm.
found at least 3 caves that are above water now that would have been underwater when Lake Champlain was marine. So I've been trying to hunt in those, digging around the bottom and see if I can find any bones of ones that died, say, 10,000 years ago when it was marine.
Hmm.
And the other way of going about this is that they have these things they use in shark and whale research called biopsy darts. They're harmless. They use them all the time in whale and shark research. What it
Hmm.
is, it's a little projectile that goes out and hits the animal's skin and retrieves a very small plug of tissue from the skin. And you retrieve the dart, then you've got a tissue sample that you could analyze for DNA, and it will also give you information about the genetic health of the population, how many individuals are likely to be in the population just from the genetic information available in a tissue sample. So I've got a spear with a biopsy dart on the end of it, and the idea is not to throw it like a javelin, but if we can ever get close enough to one of these animals, I'll reach out and gently touch it with the dart and get a tissue sample.
Oh,
A
wild.
million one chance of that happening, but it's better to be prepared if it does happen. You're prepared to do something. So,
Mm.
Right.
so I think that if we could get a tissue sample in combination with, say, bones, that would qualify as a type specimen. The combination of the two, maybe even the bones would be enough to do it. But if there is an unknown animal and we can find physical proof of it, then that will do the trick. It will, after that point, it will be an officially recognized real animal. It'll be given a Latin name and will be protected. So that's what I've been trying to concentrate my efforts on.
Hmm.
Yeah, but this has really been hampered because 2 years ago, my research partner, William Dragenis, died of cancer. We had a big
Oh,
boat, $3,000 sonar unit, and all kinds of stuff, and he had to sell all that to pay for his medical bills. And he passed away, so I've been having to kind of reboot here lately.
I'm really sorry to hear that.
Yeah, these things happen, but I just recently purchased a $400 sonar unit, so that's being shipped to Vermont ahead of me, and I'm supposed to go up there in August and rig all this up with a raft that I bought. So I will have sonar, and I'm planning on getting some underwater cameras, and my biopsy darts and all that stuff is sitting at my friend's house in Vermont, so it's already there, waiting on me.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Oh.
so I'm getting ready for August. I plan on staying a month, so we'll see what happens.
Right on.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind me asking, where do you stay when you go to visit? Do you have friends that you stay with? Do you rent a hotel? Do you have property out there that you go to?
No, I stay with friends that help me with the research.
Nice.
Yeah.
What's your favorite?
Occasionally I will, be brought up there by a TV crew to do a TV program, and sometimes they get me a motel room and pay
That's
for my
nice.
airfare. So it has happened before, but most of the time comes out of my own pocket and donations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What's your favorite place to eat up there?
Oh boy, I would say Ray's Seafood in Essex Junction, Vermont. They have the best fish and chips in the world.
Ooh.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that got me excited. I love me
Yeah.
some fish and chips, man.
Yeah. I would imagine you probably got some killer Mexican food places in LA.
Oh yeah.
I love Mexican food too.
Oh yeah, it's great. I mean, you can, go down the street to a carniceria and find, cow tongue and liver and all
Yeah.
sorts of the kind of gross things that I don't
all,
like to eat.
all of Eli's favorite foods.
No.
Well, I like gyros too.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. We got some good places out here that could, I mean, I want to say LA is good place if you want a good variety of just tasty food.
Yeah, I used to live in Philadelphia, so I know what having a big choice of menu is. So
And so, if I can ask, what's your working hypothesis on what these champ creatures are?
well, I mean, if you take the best photographic evidence and video evidence and the consensual part of most of the eyewitness reports, what they are reporting looks like a plesiosaur, an extinct marine reptile from the Mesozoic era. The long neck, horse-looking head, the humped body. I mean, basically the Loch Ness Monster image.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Now you have to juxtapose this with things like the environmental DNA study over at Loch Ness that failed to find any reptilian DNA in their samples. So I don't know. Another possibility is some kind of a giant eel, like a giant fat conger eel, is another possibility.
Hmm.
And other people have suggested primitive whales like Basilosaurus, if you're familiar with that animal,
Mm-hmm.
an extinct elongated whale from the Eocene period about 40 million years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they look kind of eelish too, and they had a horse-like head, but they didn't have the long neck. So,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
but until I see a better idea, I'm sticking with the plesiosaur idea, as unlikely as some people think that is.
Hmm. And I guess I hear a lot of, when we were talking about Loch Ness and stuff, the neck flexure of plesiosaurs, supposedly, if I'm understanding it correctly, they weren't able to lift their heads out of the water, like the infamous surgeon's photograph, or even like Sandra Mancey's photograph. And I just, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, if we're dealing with plesiosaurs that have evolved for another 66 million years beyond their presumed extinction, we don't know that might not have changed over time.
That's true.
And there's still a lot of theoretical debate about the fossil kinds that we know about. One thing that could very profoundly affect the ability of them to hold their neck up out of the water and the flexibility of it is the presence of cartilage between the vertebrae. They're not sure how thick the intervertebral cartilage that separated the vertebrae were. If they were thicker than they are generally assuming they are, the vertebrae would be further apart and the movement would be less constricted, if you follow what I'm talking about here.
Yeah, I do.
There's a lot of debate about that. So the ability of plesiosaurs, how much vertical neck flexure they had, and also whether they were able to move around on land or not, are two very contentious debates in paleontology that you see varying opinions on. I have a file just about plesiosaur neck flexibility, and it's probably got 40 different scientific papers in it making different arguments.
Jeez.
So the deeper you get into these questions, the more subtleties and things you have to take into consideration about the debate.
Mm-hmm.
So you can literally follow both debates down the rabbit hole. So at this point, I would say the main thing that constricts the flexibility of plesiosaur necks are the neural spines. If you look at the vertebrae, they have these really high spikes coming off the top of them for the attachment of muscles. So the general thinking is that these high neural spines would have constricted raising the neck up because these neural spines would bump into each other the higher you tried to raise the neck.
Mm-hmm.
So taking a middle road stance, I think it's pretty much, looking at the anatomy of plesiosaur necks, you can rule out them holding their necks up at, say, a 90-degree angle, straight up and down from the body.
Mm-hmm.
But, say, a 60 or 70-degree angle, or no, say 60, 70 degrees, maybe a 45-degree angle is certainly possible. Which that would mean it would be kind of like, say the body's flat in the water, it would be like at a slight angle coming up from the body. So that is possible. And then the other possibility is if you had this animal with its body hanging vertically in the water and you couldn't see the body under the water, the neck would be standing straight up in line with the body.
Mm-hmm.
And would be able to stand straight up out of the water like a pole. So there's all sorts of possibilities there, so we just don't know, really.
It's interesting because, like you mentioned, that I never really thought of all the variables that just go into something as simple as the spines on the back of the neck, restricting it for lifting. So that is very interesting to me.
Well, there's a lot of things about plesiosaur anatomy based on soft tissue like muscles and organs that we don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
For a long time, they thought plesiosaurs didn't have scales. Then a few years ago, they found an exceptionally well-preserved one in Mexico and found scales and blubber preserved.
Whoa.
Oh,
So
wow.
we didn't know about that, and now we know they had scales. For a long time, it was assumed that they had smooth skin like an eel, but no, they have reduced scales.
And so, like, these would look like snake scales or something like that?
Sort of, but they were very small for the size of the body. In other words, if you were standing far off, the scales are so small you probably would notice them. like maybe say 5, 10 feet away from the animal, you probably would notice them. They're so small.
Interesting.
Interesting.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
But they have done studies on the bone histology of plesiosaurs, and they've also found them in fossil deposits with climatic indicators based on the types of rocks that some of them lived in cold water with ice in it. So putting all this together suggests that plesiosaurs were at least partially warm-blooded, like a leatherback sea turtle, and could live in cold water. So these arguments about, the water's too cold for a reptile apparently don't apply to the fossil plesiosaurs. And if we're dealing with living ones now, it would probably be the same argument.
Wild.
And they also gave live birth in the water because they found one out in Kansas with a baby still up inside the mama's body.
Huh.
Oh.
So there's a lot of things, if you do a lot of deep digging in the literature, there's a lot of information out there. But you have to keep this in perspective. Just because what people are reporting at Lake Champlain and Loch Ness looks like a plesiosaur does not automatically lead to the conclusion that it is one. It could be some other type of animal that has evolved convergently to plesiosaurs. We just don't know yet. So you kind of got to set the evidence in two different stacks. You've got the evidence of the photographs and eyewitness reports from Lake Champlain and Loch Ness over here on one side. Then you've got all this paleontology data about what we know about plesiosaurs over here in another pile. But if you look at and cross-correlate them, you do see a lot of interesting correlations. But until we prove that there is an animal in Lake Champlain, we can't really say. If we were able to find genetic evidence of the animal in Lake Champlain and do genetic studies and says, okay, it's a reptile and it looks like it might be related to plesiosaurs, then you've got something to work with.
Right.
So it's kind of, in flux at this point, but it's best to always be prepared for that possibility. And to the best of my ability, that's what I've tried to do.
Right. As I understand it, you yourself have had a sighting of Champ.
Yep. One time, July of 1994, I was at Battery Park in Burlington, Vermont, scanning the water with binoculars. I didn't have a camera at the time. I had just moved there and spent all my money. I didn't have any money at that particular point to invest in a bunch of video and camera equipment. Later on, I did. But at the time, I was watching the water, and there's a buoy out from Battery Park about 1,000 yards out. And I saw this thing come up like a big moundish looking hump with a smaller hump-like object in the middle of it. Then it turned to the right, and the smaller object, which I assume is either a flipper or a head, I haven't been able to decide in all these years, started swimming to the right. And it swam along for about, 10 seconds, and then it stopped and then sank like a rock, and it was over.
Whoa.
So what I did is I hung around for a while, and I kept, to try to estimate the size of it, I kept looking for something to compare it with, and a boat came by. And I could see this boat clearly, and about 2 blocks down from the park is a boat marina. So I walked down to the boat marina, trying to find a boat that looked like the one I saw, which was about the same size as the object I saw. And I found one, and I estimated it was about 15 feet long. So based on that, I think the size of the monster object or whatever it was I saw was about 15 feet long. Later that evening, I went home and I made drawings based on what I saw a few hours after it happened. So that's the closest thing I have to a photograph. I still have those drawings, and they were made hours after it happened. So that's as reliable a document as I have of what I saw.
Now, did you also write down details as well, or did you just do the drawings? Because I know if I ever see anything crazy, I journal every day. So every
Well,
day I've got just pages and pages of what happened throughout the day. So I'm curious how much detail you would have added to those drawings. Like, did you put notations around, or was it just the image?
just the image. But I can tell you the coloration was a garbage back color, sort of a greenish black.
Mm,
And if you see a leatherback turtle, that's pretty much the color that this thing was, except it didn't have the spots like you see on a leatherback turtle.
Mm-hmm.
gotcha.
Yeah. So the
Interesting.
leatherback turtle is probably the closest thing known to science at this point to a plesiosaur. It's the largest sea turtle there is that we know about. They can get 10 feet long.
Mm-hmm.
They're huge. It's the largest living marine reptile. And they also are partially warm-blooded, like I was talking about with the plesiosaurs.
Hmm.
Yeah. So,
If I remember correctly, I guess going back to a working hypothesis of what Champ is, in that series On the Trail of Champ, I think you mentioned something about like a long-necked turtle of some kind.
well, a lot of people have speculated that rather than being a plesiosaur, it could be a long-necked turtle. Now, that is certainly one of the better hypotheses, but the two main problems with the turtle idea are, number one, these animals have been seen to change the shape of their back. The
Hmm.
way turtles are built, their rib cage has come out and expanded around the body into a box. In other words, the rib cages have grown outside to where their limb, shoulders, and hips are inside their ribs. And these ribs have expanded into an inflexible box. So, in other words, turtles, the fossil kinds, the living ones, none of them have any kind of spinal flexure to change the shape of their back. And these monsters have been seen to change the shape of their back into multiple humps or one hump. They've actually been seen to change the shape of their back. And that would theoretically
Mm.
be impossible for any kind of turtle. And the other problem is that all known turtles lay eggs. They come ashore and lay eggs. There's not one instance in the fossil record or of living turtles of them giving live birth in the water like a plesiosaur or a whale. So if you say that these animals are turtles, then you've got to have these giant female turtles coming ashore to lay eggs if they want to reproduce, if there's a reproducing population of them. And that's very problematic. So
Yeah, I
that's those are the two objections to the turtle idea. However, it's not impossible. You know,
right.
we don't know yet whether there is a resident population of champ creatures, or if they only occasionally come in from the sea and then go back out again. Now, if you had a
Mm-hmm.
situation like that where there's not a resident population and they're not reproducing in Lake Champlain, then that's a whole other ball game.
Right. And because there's a bunch of rivers that feed into Lake Champlain, right?
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
two rivers connecting Lake Champlain to the ocean. There's the Hudson River and the St. Lawrence River, which is connected to Lake Champlain at the top through another river called the Richelieu River. Now, the problem with the idea of champs migrating in and out of the lake is that down on the southern end, where the Hudson River connects, you've got a set of canal locks. So, whatever animal's going to get in and out down there has to navigate those canals without being seen, which is highly problematic. On the north end,
Huh.
you have a lot of shallow places on the rivers. But now, if we're dealing with an amphibious animal, it could get out and crawl around obstructions in theory. So,
Wow, this is wow.
but we're just at this point we don't have enough information to be able to say one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
There's certainly enough food in Lake Champlain to support a population of breeding animals. So one
Right.
idea is that there's a breeding population of these animals in the lake that have been trapped in there ever since it was cut off from the sea about 10,000 years ago and have adapted to fresh water. Now, one thing that supports that idea is the fact that there are 4 different kind of fish living in the lake now that are believed to be relics that survived from the Champlain Sea and adapted to fresh water. So
Ooh.
it is theoretically possible.
Yeah, wild.
That's crazy. Whoa.
Yeah. And you got a population of lake sturgeons that are indigenous to the lake, has been in there for about 6,000 to 8,000 years, that migrated up from the Mississippi River Basin. And genetic studies on these lake sturgeons says that there's a historical population of 3,000 of them. And these fish can get 7 feet long. I mean, they're really big fish.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an established fact in the lake. So according to theoretical ecology, in order for a species to survive in the long run, you need at least 500 individuals. So comparing that with the 3,000 estimated population of lake sturgeon, that's 6 times the amount that some other animal would need to have a viable breeding population in the lake. Now, I'm not saying that there are 500 champs in there now, but there could have been 500 champs in there, say 10,000, 12,000 years ago. And they've slowly been dwindling down. They could be in the process of going extinct right now. Who knows? There might only be 3 of them in there right now. Nobody knows, but it is theoretically possible.
Mm-hmm.
I've never even looked at it like that.
Yeah. Well, I've tried to look at this thing from every possible angle you could,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've had 27 years to do this,
Yeah. I guess my next question was going to be about the Sandra Mancy photograph.
Yeah, well, I knew Sandra Mancy. She was a friend of mine. She passed away about 2 years ago. Oh, no, actually, almost 3.
So,
Yeah, I believe she was sincere. And even some people that don't think what she photographed was Champ think she was sincere. I personally am inclined to think that the object in the photograph is a Champ animal.
mm-hmm.
But some other people think that it is a floating log that looks like a plesiosaur, which is
Right.
possible. I mean, we don't know. We can't go back in a time machine and verify the object in the photograph. So the most reasonable answer is that it is either a piece of wood debris that looks like a monster or it's a monster.
Hmm.
Yeah. And
Interesting.
I've done studies on the flexibility of plesiosaur necks, and I found a mounted skeleton of one that's looking back over its back in the same position as what you see in her photograph.
Mm.
And I've also found a photograph of an Asiatic monitor lizard looking over its back with a head that looks almost exactly like what you see in her photograph.
Hmm.
If you want to see this stuff, I have a paper posted online at a
Yes.
site called academia.edu. If you'll go to academia.edu and punch up my name and then look through all the papers I've written, you'll see one that says Defense of Sandra Mancy photograph. And it's in there, these photographs, you can see them.
And I guess that's the primary reason I bring it up, because I found that paper last night and I read it, and I guess I just wanted to get you talking about it on the show.
Yeah. Well, I think if you read it, then you see I'm basically saying the same thing in the papers I just told you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I've
I go with the pros and the cons of both theories. You know,
right.
I personally find it one of the most compelling pieces of evidence that there is an unknown animal in Lake Champlain.
Right. As do I. Um I don't really buy into the log theory, but
Well, let's say if there's not an unknown animal in Lake Champlain, then the log idea is the best alternative.
right.
So, look at it philosophically, but I personally am inclined to think that, yeah, it was an animal. So, and
Right.
whatever it is, it's certainly not a sturgeon.
Mm.
Yeah.
And even the most conservative size estimates say that this object is either the size of a bicycle or it's got a 6-foot body with a 3-foot neck. Now, there's no known animals that live in the water in Lake Champlain that are that size with that body configuration. So, there you go. I mean,
I wanted to ask you, Scott. Because we're doing an interview right now, and we have a tradition of when we do these fireside chats and we get to talk to people in the cryptozoology. We like to ask them, what are your 5 favorite monsters off the top of your head?
well, all of mine are water monsters. So,
Woohoo! Well,
it would have to be probably Champ, the Loch Ness Monster, the Zeo Maru carcass would definitely be number 3 if you're familiar with that.
is that the one that they pulled out of the water? It's like the decomposing, looks like a
Yeah.
plesiosaur.
Exactly.
Yeah.
77. Then after that would probably be the Valhalla sea serpent, which was a sea serpent seen off Brazil that looked like a plesiosaur by 2 scientists in 1905. And they published a report about it in the Proceedings of the Zoological Society of London. So it's universally held as the most credible sea serpent sighting of all time.
Oh wow.
Then number 5 would be an incident that happened in the mid-1960s in the Bahamas with the Alvin submersible, which is a Navy submersible. These 2 pilots were down inspecting some underwater listening array that was used by the government to look for enemy Russian submarines and claimed to have seen something that looked like a plesiosaur. This happened in 1965 in the Bahamas. So those are my 5 favorites, definitely.
Whoa. Well, I gotta say that is a badass list.
Yeah. Which I have articles about all that stuff, not necessarily written by me, but posted for historical value in my academia list of articles. So if you
Dope.
see stuff about that, you can go to the same place that he got the Mansi photo paper and see those too.
Ooh. I
Oh,
definitely
right on.
will. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. So
Wild.
I've tried to put together the best possible scientific case that can be made to argue for these animals being possibly real.
Mhm.
And obviously, whatever they are, even if they've been landlocked in Lake Champlain and Loch Ness for thousands of years, they obviously had to originate somewhere in the ocean.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, how are you going to feel if one day they are proven to exist? Because, the whole goal of a cryptozoologist is to research these animals that are expected or not expected to exist. And I'm just wondering, if you ever get to that point, is it going to feel fulfilling, or is it going to, like, what are you going to do after that?
Something else, obviously. At that point, it will be taken away from the cryptozoologist
Right.
Right.
and put in the hands of the zoologist, which is fine and dandy. I want these things to be proven to exist.
Hmm.
But look at the good side of this. If we can prove that one of these cryptids that people have been looking for 60 or 90 years is real, then that's going to open up the floodgates for people to take all of it seriously.
Yeah.
And we might even be able to get funding like a normal scientist does to go out and do this work. Most of the cryptozoology work that is done now is paid for out of the pockets of the cryptozoologists
Mm-hmm.
because,
I mean,
you know, there's just kind of a bias at this point that the majority of scientists in the biology field do not believe that these creatures are real. They think they're just folklore entities or whatever you want to call it. And if we can
yeah.
establish that one of them is real, then it might open up people's minds to say, well, maybe these other ones are too.
Oh yeah.
So wait and see what happens. Most likely, I would go hunt for another water cryptid somewhere else.
Yeah. I guess
I
there
don't
is
know
kind of
what
a
that might
never-ending
be.
list.
Yeah, it takes all the money I have just to go to Lake Champlain and do my work every year. I wish I had the funding to go to Loch Ness. I'd be over there right now.
Yeah.
There's a lake in Montana that has a series of reports going back to the 1880s called Flathead Lake.
Mm.
That needs to be investigated. Somebody needs to be up at, Okanagan Lake continuing the work that was done back in the 70s and 80s.
Mm-hmm.
So,
There's no
I would,
shortage.
yeah, I would be overjoyed. I mean, to me, that's the ultimate goal, is to show that these animals are real, you know. So if that happened, I would be happy. I'd just go look somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
That's wild. I was actually going to ask you about Loch Ness, though. How do you feel about that? I feel like, based on what you've said already, I can kind of guess, but what do you think?
Well, like I said, you can't ignore the environmental DNA survey that was done last year.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very significant step forward, even though there are flaws in the study. The biggest red flag about the study that came out was that they found no otter DNA or no seal DNA. And they know for a fact that there are otters living in Loch Ness and that seals occasionally come into Loch Ness. They should have theoretically found otter and seal DNA, and they didn't. So this opens up the possibility that there could have been things in there that, because of the places that they were sampling or the depth that they were sampling out, they might have missed. So we don't know.
Right. And this
The other,
was, I'm sorry,
go ahead.
for those who don't know about this study, this was a DNA test, right? Of some kind?
Yeah, it's a technique called environmental DNA. So what it is, they're taking water samples and they're extracting from the water remnant portions of DNA that have been left behind from animals, such as dead skin cells, excrement, and blood. They
Mm.
can retrieve DNA sequences from the water, from the pieces of animals left behind that were in the water column. So what they were doing, they were taking water samples and then extracting the DNA sequences from the water samples
Mm-hmm.
and sequencing them on computers. They
Wild.
found most of the known fish that live in the lake. There's been a lot of speculation over the years that Nessie could have been caused by sightings of large Wells catfish and giant sturgeons. And they found absolutely no sturgeon DNA, no Greenland shark DNA, and no catfish DNA in their samples.
Mm.
So, for a lot of people, that seems to rule out those theories. But by the same token, they found no reptilian DNA whatsoever, even though they don't have a DNA sample of a fossil plesiosaur, the fact that they found absolutely no reptilian DNA at least seems to rule out the possibility that there is a resident population of large reptiles in Loch Ness. Now, that doesn't rule out large reptiles coming and going occasionally and being seen, which could possibly include plesiosaurs as well. But we just don't know. But that seems to rule out a resident population of plesiosaurs in Loch Ness. The most significant thing that came away from the environmental DNA survey, they found an excess of eel DNA. So, based on the large amount of eel DNA that they found in the survey, they have suggested that possibly the Loch Ness monster could be a population of giant eels of some kind. And that's one reason the eel theory has become so popular since the DNA results were released in September of last year.
Right. So, is there any hope of getting a test like this done at Lake Champlain?
Hopefully, but I can tell you that the results from Lake Champlain would be highly different from the ones in Loch Ness because we have an abundant herpetofauna in Lake Champlain. There are all kinds of turtles, water snakes. There's even one species of lizard. So you would definitely get reptilian DNA from Lake Champlain.
I guess that wouldn't help you too much, huh?
Well, it depends on if you could break down the DNA and decide, well, this one over here is a turtle, this one over here is another known species, but we got this one over here that's unknown. So if we found a DNA sequence of an unknown reptile in Lake Champlain, that would be a step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And you also have sturgeons in Lake Champlain, whereas there's no verified sturgeons in Loch Ness. I would like to mention two other pieces of video evidence from Lake Champlain that are very intriguing.
Oh, sure.
Please do, yeah.
There's a video from 2005 taken by two men, Peter Baudet and Richard Afalter, near the mouth of the Ausable River on the New York side of the lake. That's very compelling. You see this object in the water off the side of their boat that looks like the head and neck of a plesiosaur, and it's moving in the video, and you also see some kind of object that resembles a flipper coming out to the side of the neck. This is commonly referred to as the Baudet video. So I don't know if you've seen that or not.
I haven't seen the actual video itself. I've seen, is it Nate Brislin who's doing a documentary on it?
Carrick St. Laurent.
Oh, it's Carrick. Carrick St. Laurent is doing the Baudet film.
Yep, I'm actually helping him on it. So.
Oh, right on.
He's supposed to meet me up there in August, and we're going to do some filming for it. So.
Oh,
see what happens. The other video was shot in May of 2009 at a place called Oak Ledge Park in Burlington, Vermont, not far from where I had my sighting, about 15 years after I had my sighting. And the object you see in this video resembles a large turtle, which, plesiosaurs and turtles are very similar in their anatomy, so this could be something else too. So that's about the best the video evidence gets from Lake Champlain. And you said you saw the Small Town Monsters documentary, right?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, me and my research partner, William, were over in the same location that the Baudet video was shot and got this sonar object that swam underneath the boat. It was vaguely plesiosaur shaped.
Whoa.
And we estimate it was probably about 10 to 13 feet long, but this happened in the same place that the Baudet video was shot. We purposely went over there because of the Baudet video. So that's in the documentary. And another interesting thing is back in 2003, a bioacoustician recorded sounds in the lake that resemble whale echolocation. And
Oh.
after the initial recordings, about 5 or 6 years after that, I began working with her, and we got additional recordings in the summer of 2009 and actually posted or wrote a scientific abstract about it that was published in the Journal of the Acoustical Society of America. So we'll see what happens with that, you know.
Right.
That's still in process at this point. So.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
Another interesting thing that happened, 2016, the Asahi Broadcasting from Japan came over to make a documentary, and I was involved in that. And we went over to the deepest part of Lake Champlain, which is a place called Split Rock, 400 feet deep. And they went over there on my suggestion, but they had their own equipment that they brought with them. It was a downrigger, fishing rigger, rigged with underwater camera and a light source, and we baited it with salmon and put it down 80 feet below the boat in 400 feet of water. On the documentary, you see some kind of appendage come up and touch the bait on camera.
Ugh.
It looks like maybe an eel's tail or possibly a flipper or something. But you physically see this come up on the video and touch the bait and then withdraw. So that was interesting too. We don't know what it was, but the appendage that you see in the video is probably about 2 feet long, whatever it is.
Whoa.
2
So
feet long.
That was very interesting too. Yeah.
That's pretty big, huh? For a
Yeah.
flipper.
Yeah. We don't know if it was a flipper or a tail. I mean, there were no indications of eyes or a mouth on it, so it was an appendage of some sort.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's only there for a few seconds and then it's gone, but it's there on the camera. And if you want to see that, I have my own YouTube channel. You can punch up Scott Mardis YouTube and go to my video channel and look through the videos, and you'll see the video of the thing coming up to touch the bait. So,
Whoa.
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. And those other videos that I just talked about, the Olson video from 2009 and the Bodette video from 2005, they're both posted there too. So.
Oh, dope.
Oh, they are. Oh, okay,
Yeah,
cool.
so it's all right there if you want to check it out. Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Will do.
Yeah.
I had a question, Scott. This might be kind of my final question. Is I have some research done, and let me know if it's true. But I was told that you're a fan of Turok, Dinosaur Hunter.
Well, the comic book Turok, Son of Stone. Yeah, I grew up with it.
Oh, that's awesome.
You know, it's very popular with the Indians too.
Mm-hmm.
They love it.
I was gonna
it's just
say.
fantastic. I'm actually part Cherokee.
Oh.
One of my great grandfathers was full-blooded Cherokee, so I have some Indian in me. Not enough to where I can say that I'm an Indian, but
Right.
But yeah. And speaking of that, there's actually quite a bit of lore among the Indian tribes around Lake Champlain about there being a serpent creature in the lake. Some of the probably the earliest champ evidence you have.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me pull up. I have some of this in our research for one of our champ episodes. Let's see. It's a specific rock, Split Rock in Essex Village, right?
Yeah.
That's supposedly
Was a holy site.
Is a holy site and the home of a spirit, right?
Yeah.
And
well,
so
the different tribes, you had Iroquois on the New York side and the Western Abenaki on the Vermont side.
Mm-hmm.
The Western Abenaki called the creature in the lake, they called it Gitaskog, was their name for it.
Mm-hmm.
And on the New York side of the lake, the Iroquois called it Oniari, was their name for it. And it's very interesting. You got two regional sets of petroglyphs, rock carvings, that seem to represent some kind of a serpent-like animal in the region. You go down to southern Vermont, around Brattleboro, there are rock carvings that are now underwater by the Abenaki that seem to show some kind of plesiosaur-like creature. That's in Brattleboro. Then you go up into Canada, and you go slightly west of the northernmost part of Lake Champlain, which is in Canada. There's a place called Mount Pinnacle, and there's a carving of a dragon-looking creature with a boat.
Weird.
Yeah. Now, if you want to see those, there's a paper that I wrote in those papers at Academia. That's one called History of the Lake Champlain Monster and Related Regional Phenomena. Has photographs of both of these petroglyphs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, I gotta check that out.
Yeah. So.
Wild. I've kind of exhausted all of my questions. Did anyone else have any questions? Or if Scott, if you have anything you also would like to talk about,
Well,
please.
I will just add, and this is very important, is that they have found fossils of whales, seals, and even a walrus that lived in the marine version of Lake Champlain thousands of years ago. There was a beluga whale skeleton dug up in Charlotte, Vermont back in 1849, and it's the Vermont state fossil. So they have absolute concrete proof that what is now Lake Champlain was once marine and had large marine animals living in it. So this is potentially the proof of an origin of a population of animals that may have survived from this marine time, that it definitely was marine. And like I said before, some of the fishes that live in the lake now, their ancestors would have been contemporaries with these fossil whales and seals that they have found the bones of. So, unlike a lot of places where you get these monster stories, Lake Champlain has a very good theoretical foundation from which you could say, yes, it's possible that something could be there from prehistoric times from when it was connected to the sea. So, most places you get monster stories don't have that foundation. So, yeah.
That's very interesting.
So,
Actually.
yeah, this is all very important, if you want to get serious about there being something really there. So, yeah. And I think I just told you all the things that have happened to me personally that make me go back every year to think that there really is something there. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So if there's any last things you want to ask, by all means do.
Okay. I guess going back to that Turok thing, have you played any Turok games?
No, but I've seen the animated movie, which I liked very much.
Oh
and,
yeah, that was pretty
loved
good.
the comic book.
And I guess for the listeners out there, if you don't know who Turok is, he's started out as a comic book, and then kind of got reinvented in the '90s as a video game character. But he's a Native American hunter who his family protects the Lost Lands, where it's like this primeval world where time means nothing and aliens and dinosaurs exist, and he's the only protection we have from the evils.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's pretty sick.
I think Indians and dinosaurs are much cooler than cowboys and Indians.
Oh,
Always
man.
have.
I'm a hardcore Western guy.
Eli is a cowboy.
Yeah.
Well, I like westerns too, but I actually like Indian movies better than cowboy movies.
That's
There's a
understandable.
subgenre. There's a subgenre of westerns, movies like Little Big Man, The Windwalker. that are Indian movies about
Right.
Indians. Yeah, they're really cool.
And I see that you're a fan of some country music.
Actually, no, I was making fun of it.
Oh no! Oh darn!
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm strictly a rocker. I'm into rock music and blues and R&B and funk.
Oh,
More
right
of
on.
the African American musical idioms. Most of
Yeah,
the
right on.
music I like has African roots in it. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was
Darn.
I was gonna ask earlier when you were mentioning off bands. I was curious. Do you like the Pixies at all? This is unrelated.
I know who they are. It's a little bit after my time,
hmm
but I know who they are.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say just based on a little bit of what you guys were trying to get. I was like, if you ever listen to Surfer Rosa by the Pixies, it's a cool kind of punk surf rock deconstruction album.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, I was like, oh, you listen off some cool music, and I'm for it.
Believe it or not, I used to work at the Tower Records in Philadelphia from 1988 to 1991. So I remember there was all this, you know, things like the Pixies and Dinosaur Jr. and all those guys were coming
Oh
out
yeah,
right when I was
yeah.
working at the record store. So I remember it, Psychic
Mhm,
TV. I mean, I most of the music I like is from the '60s and '70s. Just
Mhm.
my generation. But
And
I
so you
do
mentioned
listen
King
to newer
Crimson,
music.
which
Yeah, 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 yeah.
mhm.
Well, King Crimson goes back a long way. They go back to the
Oh
late
yeah.
'60s. Yeah, I'm a huge King Crimson fan, and they're still making music now too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Some people think Fripp is God.
But I mean, did either of you two guys, Jasmine, Alex, have any questions? Or Scott, if you had any questions for us?
Nope.
When is when is it gonna air?
Yeah. Uh, right now, as you're listening to it.
Oh, it's fine. Okay, that's fine.
uh, no, it's not live. I was just saying in the future.
That's good.
Yes, sir. But with that, I guess we'll sign off.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely thank you for coming on, Scott. You
Yes,
raised a lot
thanks
of
for having me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome. You raised a lot of interesting aspects about for champ research and and underaquatic cryptid research that was really neat, and I like the deep take that you have with especially with like the skeletons of plesiosaurs and the
Yeah.
biology differences of turtles. So that was really neat.
If you want people to take it serious, you have to talk about the nuts and the bolts. It's where the rubber meets
Mhm.
the road.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What a good saying.
Yeah.
It's where the rubber meets the road.
I think that concludes it, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Well, you guys have a good night, and I enjoyed it. And thank you for having me on.
Yeah. And I guess if we want to find you online, do you have anything to plug, Scott?
Well, I have two Facebook groups: the Zombie Plesiosaur Society and Champ Lake Champlain Monster Research by Scott Mardis and William Dragenis. I have a
Hmm.
book that's available as an ebook on Amazon called Night of the Living Dead Plesiosaurs. Uh,
Ooh.
yeah, I'm supposed to be on some television projects in the near future. I don't know when they're going to air, and it's a documentary, so keep an eye out.
Oh
You
yeah.
may never know where I'll pop
A man who's everywhere and nowhere at the same time.
up. Absolutely.
Right on. Thank you, Scott.
Yep. Have a good night.
You
You too,
too.
sir.
So, Alex, if I want to find you online, how do I do that?
Oh, if you want to find me on the Instagram and the Twitter, you can find me at Alex Daikaiju. That's Alex DAIKAIJU. I post a lot of cryptid art and monster art on my Instagram, so be sure to check that out. And I wanted to find the inner workings of Jasmine Maywith's mind, where could I do that?
You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram as well. Jasmine Maywith is my name on both profiles. JasmineMaewith.
Woohoo! And Eli, if I wanted to find the cowboy of LA, where can I find you?
You can find me at the Eli Watson on Instagram. I also run the Cryptid Campfire social media. That's at Cryptid Campfire on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can visit our website, cryptidcampfire.com, to get your official Cryptid Campfire t-shirts. And I feel like it's safe to say this because this will be airing in the future, but we'll have our official Summer of Champ t-shirts up as well.
Oh yeah, come on! It's gonna be like camp, summer camp all over again, everybody.
Yeah, they're cool. They're yellow and blue. Anyways, and if you feel like you guys like us a lot, pay a visit to our Patreon page, where for $5 a month, that gets you exclusive episodes. I think we're up to 2 or 3 a month with early access to regular episodes, so you'll get them on Sundays instead of Tuesdays, along with exclusive images, photos, and we interact with you a little bit more, I guess.
Oh yeah, and I mean, Eli mentioned it, but I think we got like 2 or 3 extra content a month. We got our Cryptid Cinema Club, and we got our Tall Tales, where we delve into lesser known strange entities. So if you want more of us, we'd love you at the Patreon. Come on and join the campfire.
Yeah.
And if you had any questions, comments, concerns, well, you can email us at cryptidcampfirepodcast@gmail.com.
Yep. And that's it.
About it. Yeah.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye. Happy summer.
Hello, everybody. You made it this far into the episode. Please enjoy a song written by Scott Mardis.
From the phone time, you driven and stolen wine. as the open road. Don't fear, tomorrow's waiting, sands of time. Oh, what's at stake?
This podcast is a part of Straight Up Strange Productions. Discover more shows like this one at straightupstrange.com.